As they went past the farm turning, he saw the farmer backing his car out of the garage. Nat called to him. "Can you give us a lift?" he said. "What's that?" Mr. Trigg turned in the driving seat and stared at them. Then a smile came to his cheerful, rubicund face. "It looks as though we're in for some fun," he said. "Have you seen the girls? Jim and I are going to take a crack at them. Everyone's gone bird crazy, talking of nothing else. I hear you are troubled in the night. Want a gun?" Nat shook his head. The small car was packed. There was just room for Jill if she crouched on top of petrol tins on the back seat. "I don't want a gun," said Nat, "but I'd be obliged if you'd run Jill home. She's scared of the birds." He spoke briefly. He did not want to talk in front of Jill. "OK," said the farmer. "I'll take her home. Why don't you stop behind and join the shooting match? We'll make the feathers fly." Jill climbed in, and turning the car, the driver sped up the lane. Nat followed after. Trigg must be crazy. What use was a gun against a sky of birds? Now Nat was not responsible for Jill, he had time to look about him. The birds were circling still above the fields, mostly herring gull, but the black-backed gull amongst them. Usually they kept apart. Now they were united. Some bond had brought them together. It was the black-backed gull that attacked the smaller birds, and even newborn lambs, so he'd heard. He'd never seen it done. He remembered this now, though, looking above him in the sky. They were coming in toward the farm. They were circling lower in the sky, and the black-backed gulls were to the front. The black-backed gulls were leading. The farm, then, was their target. They were making for the farm. Nat increased his pace towards his own cottage. He saw the farmer's car turn and come back along the lane. It drew up beside him with a jerk. "The kid has run inside," said the farmer. "Your wife was watching for her." "Well, what do you make of it? They're saying in town the Russians have done it. The Russians have poisoned the birds." "How could they do that?" asked Nat. "Don't ask me. You know how stories get around. Will you join my shooting match?" "No, I'll get along home. The wife will be worried else." "My missus says if you could eat gull there'd be some sense in it," said Trigg. "We'd have roast gull, baked gull, and pickle 'em into the bargain. You wait until I let off a few barrels into the brutes. That'll scare 'em." "Have you boarded your windows?" asked Nat. "No, lot of nonsense. They like to scare you on the wireless. I've had more to do today than go around boarding up my windows." "I'd board them now if I were you." "Gone. You're windy. Like to come to our place to sleep?" "No, thanks all the same." "All right, see you in the morning. Give you a gull breakfast." The farmer grinned and turned his car to the farm entrance. Nat hurried on. Past the little wood, past the old barn, and then across the stile to the remaining field. As he jumped the stile, he heard the whir of wings. A black-backed gull dived down at him from the sky, missed, swerved in flight, and rose to dive again. In a moment it was joined by others, 6, 7, a dozen, black-backed and herring mixed. Nat dropped his hoe. The hoe was useless. Covering his head with his arms, he ran towards the cottage. They kept coming at him from the air, silent save for the beating wings. The terrible fluttering wings. He could feel the blood on his hands, his wrists, his neck. Each stab of a swooping beak tore his flesh. If only he could keep them from his eyes! Nothing else mattered. He must keep them from his eyes. They had not learned yet how to cling to a shoulder, how to rip clothing, how to dive in mass upon the head, upon the body. But with each dive, with each attack, they became bolder. They had no thought for themselves. When they dived low and missed, they crashed, bruised and broken, on the ground. As Nat ran, he stumbled, kicking their spent bodies in front of him. He found the door. He hammered upon it with his bleeding hands. Because of the boarded windows, no light shone. Everything was dark. "Let me in!" he shouted. "It's Nat! Let me in!" He shouted loud to make himself heard above the whir of the gull's wings. Then he saw the gannet, poised for the dive above him in the sky. The gulls circled, retired, soared, one after another, against the wind. Only the gannet remained. One single gannet above him in the sky. The wings folded suddenly to its body. It dropped like a stone. Nat screamed and the door opened. He stumbled across the threshold and his wife threw her weight against the door. They heard the thud of the gannet as it fell.